This video is the first in a two-part series. Part 1 will be a short history of the Internet, how it loosely works, and how participatory culture was enabled through this technology. Part 2 will focus on the regulation of the Internet, particularly net neutrality, and how participatory culture is affected by such regulation. Without the underlying technologies that allow users to create and consume content on the Internet, there would be no participatory culture like we know it today. Broadly, the Internet refers to the system of connected computers and networks that are able to exchange data with one another. Therefore, using the Internet is fundamentally a form of communication. By this definition, the Internet was conceived during the space race. Some would say even a century earlier, when the Atlantic cable linked Europe and the United States by telegram. Neither of these are wholly true. In reality, the Internet as we know it would not be born until much later, after many large technological advances. Sputnik, the world's very first satellite, was launched in 1957 and it was able to transmit data from orbit back to Moscow. This was a major win in the space race for the USSR, and in response, the United States created ARPA, ARPA, the Advanced Research Projects Agency. The agency's goal was to ensure America did not fall behind in the realms of science, technology, and military, and among its greatest accomplishments was fostering the creation of many technologies that underlie today's Internet. Soon after ARPA was created in 1958, Bell Laboratories invented the modem. A modem's function is to send and receive packets of information and encode and decode that information. It is the piece of hardware that more or less connects a user to the Internet. Soon after, ARPA begins to study networking, resulting in ARPANET. ARPANET is implemented over several years and is the first Internet, insofar as it enabled the government to communicate and share information by sending and receiving packets of data between computer terminals. After this, many other networks began to form for different business and government purposes. However, these platforms were largely not compatible. Eventually, TCP was adopted, which essentially is an encoding standard for data packets. It defined a protocol that allows different types of machines and networks to communicate with one another. Information was now able to be linked and accessed more widely, but it was still obtuse and inaccessible for the layman. This began to change in the mid-80s when millions of people had bought personal computers, notably the Apple II, which was known for being user-friendly. Shortly thereafter, WWW, the World Wide Web, was created by Sir Thomas Berners-Lee. It was a collection of documents and content, all connected and linked together. Berners-Lee also created the first web browser, confusingly also named World Wide Web, that was accessible enough for average people to use. It not only enabled users to consume content, but also to create and post content, which is the foundation of participatory culture. For the sake of clarity, it is important to note that the Internet refers to the system of computers interconnected, whereas the web refers to the body of content on the Internet. Those components make up the basics of how the Internet functions today, but the content online is much different than it was in the mid-90s. From its beginnings as a purely military and scholarly platform, the Internet became increasingly commercialized very soon after it was adopted by the public. Since then, unique and ingenious services and products have flourished. Facebook, YouTube, Wikipedia, Netflix, Steam, Amazon, and so many other websites and services have taken great advantage of this new mode of communication, and their existence has done an immeasurable public good. The public good these platforms and the Internet at large has created is not just access to information and content. The ability of anyone to create and publish content to a global audience creates participatory culture, which is a paradigm that empowers every individual. Because of it, there is more free speech than ever before in history. Participatory culture, particularly through the Internet and social media, has been a great equalizing force in social, economic, and political capacities. As our culture continues to become more and more participatory and less curated, it is important to protect the Internet environment and the regulations on technologies that underlie it. Without fair and free access to the web, individuals are less able to engage in participatory culture, which is bad for society at large. In the second half of this series, I will talk about threats to this free and fair access, particularly the end of net neutrality. Net neutrality must be preserved if participatory culture is to be preserved.